Hello again, everyone. In today's video, I want to take a look at my IBM PS2 model 56SX. This system is very interesting to me. It's my only 386SX system. I actually did buy the IBM upgrade to convert it to a 486 SX2, and I have a math coprocessor installed, of course. You have to. And I'm running OS 2.1 on there. But before we launch the operating system, let's take a look inside. Alright, and just like magic, we have the top cover off. So in here, as I said, I don't know how well I can get this off. Sorry for the bad camera angles. Yep, not going to mess with it. But there is the 486 upgrade. It's not going to focus at all, is it? That's my 486 SX2. It's actually an IBM chip with my Reveal Cyrix math coprocessor. I am using an Olicom networking card. It's a 10100, kind of overkill for this system. There's no way the system is fast enough to actually do 100 megabit networking. Interesting to note, though, that these Olicom chips run really hot, this particular model, and I burnt out my first card. It just stopped working, and I noticed that during its entire operation, the chips were really hot. So I added these heat sinks to it to try to extend the life, and so far it's worked out quite well. And then, of course, I do want some sound, so I bought a Resound New Wave to put in here. Works beautifully, very happy with it. And I did go ahead and max out the RAM. 386 SX chips can only handle up to 16 megabytes of RAM, same limit as the 286 chip. And in here, I believe I have a 350 meg SCSI hard drive. Not that you can see from the angle I'm at. Let's see. There it is. Yeah, I'm not going to pull the whole machine apart. But that's the internals. So let's power it up and take a quick look. Okay, here we go. Put the power. It should start the countdown, or the count up of memory. There we go. It's actually going to come to a little less than 16 megs because of a chipset limitation. It'd be like 15600 or something. $15,232. So not quite 16 megs, but good enough for OS 2. And I've always found OS 2 as a fascinating operating system. It was technically really good, really powerful. My favorite versions, of course, are actually version 2 and version 3. Version 4, when they added the start menu type interface, when they tried copying Windows 95, it became boring for me. I like the fact that 2 and 3 were different and weren't trying to be Windows 95, of course, because both were released before Windows 95. And 3 is interesting with its dock interface. It actually had a dock before Next Step and Macintosh interface had a dock. Let's see if I can log into my network here without bumping too many things. Successfully logged me on, but it couldn't map my drives. Let's see if it mapped it anyways. Take a look at my drives. It did go ahead and map my drives. So OS2 was fascinating in that the net use was persistent. I could disable that. It also did not like running the batch logon script. It wants a CMD login script, and I can't be bothered to sort out between the two because I use the same user account to log into my Windows 95, Windows 3.1, even DOS machines that all use .bat. So for the couple OS2 machines I have, it's just simply not worth it. But it's really nice to have access to my network so I can easily get on here and, store or run applications. And as you might be able to barely hear ever so faintly, we do have the OS2 sounds here, which are very reminiscent of OS2 Warp, but this is indeed OS2 2.1, with all the latest fixed packs, of course. Let's take a look at system resources. I've only got 512 kilobytes of physical memory free, apparently. A 2 meg swap file. I'm not sure how accurate this is. And 232 megs free on drive C. Let's take a quick look here. Drive C. Let's do it. Unfortunately, you have to do a check disk just to see what's on the disk. I'm using the FAT file system instead of HPFS. I would rather use HPFS, actually. But I don't really want to reinstall OS2 here. Yeah, I guess it's pretty close to right. It's about, 400 meg, I guess. Maybe 360 formatting capacity, or maybe it's 365 with 361 formatting capacity. With 237 megs free. So plenty of space. And if you're wondering what this is a CPU meter called Pulse. It would actually show you what your current CPU usage is. And of course, I like to have a system clock available. And OS2 came with all sorts of interesting utilities. They tried including as much as they could. So here's a nice, interesting calculator that you can use. You've all seen a calculator before. I'm not going to do a demo of that. I do have WinOS2 installed, so that way if I want to launch Windows 3.1 applications, I can do so seamlessly without having to launch Windows within OS2 first. Like here I have PKZip for Windows. I can just simply double-click here. It does take a little bit longer to launch because it actually has to launch the Windows session quietly in the background first in order to make all the APIs available. And this is a customized version of Windows 3.1. OS2 makes a few modifications so that it can run in the OS2 environment. But then, it looks just like a Windows 3.1 application. It is running. You don't see Windows running at all. And there it is. I can run any Windows 3.1 application directly within OS2 all seamlessly. So like IBM said, it's a better DOS than DOS and a better Windows than Windows. Have a few games installed here. Solitaire. I don't know where the icons went, but I had Solitaire here. And I think Bicycle Poker were both there. Interesting. I don't know why these views are coming up blank. Also, one thing that's interesting to note, On these OS2 windows here, this is the minimize button. It minimizes all the way into the background, and this is a maximize button, so it takes a full screen. When you click this, it does not close. It remains running, but it does disappear. Like if I click here now, you don't see it, but you do see that it's running. It's got a shaded background, just like the desktop is always running. The desktop is literally the desktop, and it's shaded. The system clock is running, and it's shaded running in the background. And if you want to see what applications you have running, you have to come over here to the minimize Windows viewer, and there we go. There we have my PKZip for Windows that I minimized earlier. Still running. And now I've actually closed it. And in order to close a window, you do have to double click over here, or you can single click and come all the way down to close. Now, one peculiarity, if my mouth and tongue want to work correctly, what's interesting is that it does consistently launch new windows every time you double click, which I can, it's nice, but it can become very cluttered very quickly. The deeper you go into the folder structures. Like I'm already 3 windows open, and I'm just now getting to Excel for OS2 and the disk images that are here. So, you can be quickly overwhelmed with dialog boxes or windows. Feels weird calling them windows when it's OS2, but they are still essentially windows. So, yeah, I wish that there was a setting like in Windows 95 where you can keep the same window for all views, so when you double click it doesn't open up a new window. Unfortunately, I don't see an option this far back in OS2 2.1. Other peculiarities about OS2 is that in order to create a new file, let's see if I even have something as an example. Is everything blank? Here we go. Yeah, so like you don't typically go into the application and go file new like we're all used to. Maybe you can for Word, but I'm going to use this as an example. In order to create a new Word file, you would come here under templates and you open up a template of it. And that'll launch the application. Oh, interesting. It's supposed to. It instead launched it in the OS2 system editor. Was I supposed to right-click? Create shadow. Creating a shadow is like creating a shortcut in OS2. IBM called it shadows instead of links or shortcuts. Not as descriptive. Shortcut makes far more sense. Shadow makes no sense. So, yeah, here we go. I got to open with PM Word. And that'll create a new document in Word. And then I can choose between these types of files if I'm converting. I'm not converting anything. So I'm just going to click cancel here. And it'll open up a new Word document. I think Word actually does open up as a blank document by default, but most of IBM's utilities, they encourage the use of using these templates to create new files, which is a very interesting way to work, in my opinion. Having to always come over here. And then, of course, you would store everything on your desktop, and you may as well create a folder over here for all your documents and stuff. And that's where your desktop can become quite cluttered as well, if you have various folders, various applications. So it becomes, we've all seen some users that have their Windows desktop absolutely covered with documents. Not a good way to work. I don't like working that way. I prefer things to be a little bit more organized than that. And the last peculiarity of OS2 that's slightly different from Windows is that in order to move objects on the screen, like if I want to move information, I don't just left-click and drag. That doesn't do anything. You actually have to right click, hold, and drag. And as you can see, the icon now follows, and I can move it. And I can move it back. I'm not sure why right-clicking became the default option for moving. Maybe to prevent accidental moving when you double-click. Because that has happened to me a couple times in Windows, where I go to double-click, but I double-click so fast that I slightly move the icon. Maybe that was designed to avoid that. But, you know, it just feels more weird to have to right-click to move, to me. But still, I find OS 2 so fascinating. It is a very powerful operating system. You can actually boot from an DOS from drive A directly from here. You can dual boot. So if you had a previous version of DOS here, you can actually go back to that old version of DOS. You can launch Windows full screen or Win OS 2 full screen so that it looks like you're actually in Windows. Let's do that real quick. Loading, please wait. And here we are. We are in Program Manager. If you didn't know any better, and if you didn't see this down in the corner, you would think you're in Windows 3.1. Hey, there's my icon. And there's all the same utilities. There's my pkware, pkzip. Now, the one thing that is missing, of course, is you don't get 386 Enhanced control panel because you are not actually running in 386 protected mode. You're actually running... you're running under OS 2's protected mode. You're running as a client under there. I want to switch back to the OS 2 desktop. And let's go ahead and close the full screen. Yeah, I don't care about losing data. Now, I did actually have an old version of DOS on this system. So we can actually click here to dual boot. It'll launch a script that'll ask you, your system will be reset or restarted. Do you want to continue? Now, once you click yes, every time you power on your machine after this, it'll keep booting to your old DOS. It won't go back to Windows. You can't just, restart from DOS and go back into OS 2. It's not like Windows 95 where you're restarting into DOS mode. This is a full-fledged dual boot system. And right now we are booting right back into the old version of DOS that was here. It's going to start up the system. Give it a moment. And I believe that's one of the reasons why I went with staying with the FAT file system. But I am on MS-DOS version 5 back here. Seems sacrilegious. Seems like it should be PC-DOS version 5. But I'm here. This is straight up DOS. I can go in here and I can go into sysinfo. Nope, that's an OS 2 program. Let's see, what else do I have here that I could show off? Well, let's go into Snooper, a system information utility. So here you can see that it is indeed a 486. It thinks it's a DX because the math coprocessor is integrated, but it's actually not. It's a 486 SX2 or SLC2 to be more specific. And the original clock is at 20 megahertz, so this is running at 40 megahertz. A little bit of a speed boost. I'd rather have the SLC3, or is it the SLC4? I forget whichever one has the clock tripling. That way it can actually get up to 60 megahertz and give it a little more speed, because that 386 SX20 is very slow to me. At least it feels very slow. Let's go ahead and exit out of this. Is the system information tool runnable from DOS? I don't remember. It is. And this is the modified or patched version of the system information tool. Hard drives by letter. There we go. Looks like it's almost 345 meg with 224 meg, almost 225 meg available. It's always fun trying to translate between decimal values and binary values. Most applications will show the binary value, but most hard drive manufacturers always went with the decimal value because it made the drive look bigger. Memory hardware, 8, 4, and 4. That gives 16, all 70 nanoseconds parity memory. Total of 16 megs, but I don't get the full 16 megs. Operating system, I'm currently running under DOS. Here, there we go, we can see that we are running the 46 SLC2 processor, 2040. The coprocessor is the Cyrix or Reveal fast math coprocessor. And this is, of course, the IBM Model 56 computer. Very nice system. I'm very happy with it. I kind of find MCA interesting, the microchannel architecture. Systems very interesting. I know a lot of people find them frustrating, especially since you have to have boot floppies to configure everything. But, I mean, considering that this was thought up of back in 1988, and I'm sure design on it started much earlier than that, I think it's quite novel in its approach. Even though PCI is better, ISA plug and play worked very poorly in my opinion, so it seems to me it's an oxymoron, ISA plug and play. Don't get me wrong, some cards do work well under it, but a lot of legacy cards didn't, and the conflict resolution management was just non-existent. Not without using software-based configuration managers, whereas PCI worked a heck of a lot better. So if I were actually to power off the system right now, as is, I would come back to DOS. If I reboot and do a Control-Alt-Delete, that does not get me back to OS2. It's going to bring me back to DOS. Give it a moment to start up and you can see for yourself. So this was a curious approach that IBM took to dual booting. I think this was actually implemented by Microsoft back with OS2 1.2 is where the dual booting came into effect. So right here, if I rebooted my system, I'm right back here in DOS. I'm not in OS2. In order to actually boot back into OS2, I have to go into the OS2 folder. There's a boot.com command, and you do /OS2. And that'll say you're requesting to start OS2. Your system's going to reboot. Do you want to continue? Click yes. Or Y. Enter Y for yes. And then it'll swap around some startup and configuration files, reboot the system, and we'll go right back into OS2. Now, the other thing is that OS2 remembers what windows you had open and tries to reopen them for you. This is something Windows wouldn't do until, late versions of Windows 95, and then not even then was it consistent. OS2 was pretty consistent about it, so what I'm building up to is once we get into OS2, it's going to bring me right back to that command I ran in the first place to do the dual booting, and it's going to ask me, do you want a dual boot? It always does a check disk after the dual boot to make sure everything's fine. And that's what it's doing here. It's running a check disk. 8 kilobytes in every allocation unit. That's why I'd rather have HPFS, but it's fine. I don't feel like reinstalling OS2. Maybe one day I will. That is so faint, I'm not even sure if the audio picked that up. And so it remembers that I had this window open because I ran dual boot. Here's the prompt. Do you want to start DOS? So it's going to go right back to it all over again. And you're going to want to type no if you want to stay in OS 2 and go ahead and close the window. And then I'm going to go ahead and log into the network here. And then, of course, it's going to spit out the error on me. But it does restore network connections. Yeah, that's fine. Go ahead and close the window. And then, of course, you could run DOS window, DOS full screen, or OS2 window and OS2 full screen. Now, these are the OS2 command prompts. And for something like this is running cmd.exe. This is just like Windows NT's cmd.exe. It's an advanced interpreter. It's not your command.com interpreter. So when it says the command prompt for OS2, this is what it means. And then, of course, you do have DOS window. And this is running straight up command.com. It's no different than running DOS or like running a DOS prompt from within Windows 3.1 or Windows 95. So that's a quick tour of my IBM PS2 Model 56 SLC2. And this is also a quick overview of OS2 2.1. This is one of my favorite versions of OS2, right alongside OS2 version 3. Warp Connect are my two favorite versions. I think they were the best. So I hope you liked the video. Hope you found a little bit of learning about OS2 entertaining and fun. If you want more videos like this, please, by all means, subscribe to my channel. I plan on showing off more of my systems as I go. This is just playing around with all the items in my collection, in my museum, as I call it. And yeah, I like to have each item in my museum have some unique feature. That's why it's in my museum. I don't want just a whole bunch of Pentiums or a whole bunch of 486s. They each have to have something different. And this is different in that it's a 386SX or SLC, and it was upgraded to a 486. And of course, it's running OS2. So, I don't run Windows 3.1 or Windows 95 on everything. And if you liked the video, if you did find it entertaining, please give me a thumbs up. It really encourages me to continue making videos. So with all that said, thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you next time. Let's go ahead and shut down the system. Thanks.